Today's an emotional day, but I believe now in my heart of hearts that this is the right decision, and so that's what that's what makes it a little bit easier. I had confidence in the Prime Minister in 2015, and I have confidence in him today. This decision is all about me being closer to my family.
Outgoing Minister Filomena Tassi just moments ago here on the show detailing her decision not to seek re-election. She's one of 4 ministers to drop the news this morning, just days ahead of an organized caucus challenge of the Prime Minister's leadership of the Liberal Party. Today's 4 takes the tally of ministers to recently bow out of the next election up to 6. How much of a hit is this to the Prime Minister himself and his front bench? Joining me to talk about that, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant is here. He's the CEO of Space Canada now. Corey, tonight was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is Marika Walsh. She's a senior political reporter with the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Brian, I'll start with you. Do you think there's any way the Prime Minister can spin this as not a hit, another hit to his leadership, or is this, in your view, a hit to his leadership?
It's definitely a hit in the sense that it's repeating a story that's incredibly not helpful for the Liberals at this moment. It's also sort of aggravating it. There's no question about that as well. It seems like so far the ministers have certainly toed the line and said that they're still supportive of the Prime Minister, even if they are resigning. So that's helpful. But look at us right now and look at the next few days. People are going to talk about the potential of the caucus meeting going awry next week. Now, the interesting part, one little opportunity perhaps for Trudeau and his team is to actually delay a cabinet shuffle for a while. It may be a way in which you have a calmer caucus meeting on Wednesday, because maybe there's some that, maybe all, or maybe at least a handful, and maybe the more important ones are thinking to themselves, well, I'm not going to go to the mic. I'm not going to be as aggressive as I was planning, because you never know. Maybe I am about to be named a cabinet. So in a way, it could be some little bit of a blessing in disguise. Now, that said, I want to be very clear. The minute that they do the shuffle, everybody that maybe was a little calmer because of that possibility, and they see they're not asked to be in cabinet, well, that dissipates, and they're probably just as upset, maybe even more upset.
Marika, you're having a lot of conversations, as I am, with people who are hoping to convey that message to the Prime Minister. Is it your impression that at this point the possibility of getting into cabinet will dissuade them? My impression is that it would not, only because they feel like they're going to lose their seats.
Yeah, I think certainly I heard from some Liberals today saying, oh, we're being managed. Like, this is coming out just before this caucus meeting to dangle this carrot. I'm not sure if it was a sanctioned leak. Louis Blouin is a very good reporter who had it first. So who knows?
It's definitely coordinated. They did it all at once, though.
Exactly.
Minister Tassi essentially said that very blatantly.
Yeah.
She got a call last night. It's okay to release your statement today. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, it ended up being coordinated, and there is that very short-term payoff that Brian talks about. But as we saw with the shuffle last summer, there was a lot of anger that came from the people who weren't. So I'm not sure it will be the long-term payoff the Prime Minister's hoping for. I think this is just another thing to manage and figure out. And it's the third shuffle in 4 months. So there's not a sense of sort of an overarching strategy or coordination within the PMO of dealing with everything at once and then moving on.
Yeah. Corey, your thoughts on kind of what it looks like, I guess, from the outside, that you've got all this reporting about the possibility of caucus pushing you out. Sean Casey going on the record this week, a sitting MP planning to run in the next election, saying you should leave. And now 4 ministers saying, okay, of course they're going to say for their own reasons, most of them, but that they are just choosing not to seek re-election either. Like, what is the bigger picture?
I think the bigger picture is that people are quietly walking away. And there seems to be a small but growing number of MPs that are willing to confront the Prime Minister directly on his leadership. But I think there's a much larger group of people who will just quietly fade into the background here. And I think that's sort of what you're seeing. Now, I don't think these particular ministers leaving have a huge amount of national importance. People would have to know who they are to care that they're leaving. And I don't think very many Canadians, even folks like myself who follow politics pretty closely, have anything but passing familiarity of who the 4 who left today are. But some of the others who have left, particularly Rodriguez and and Seamus O'Regan are big names, and and potential leaders and past leaders of importance within the Liberal Party as a whole. So. Look, I think it's bad news. I think you can expect to see more bad news like this. I was chuckling at Brian's point because I think he's bang on. Nothing brings caucus in alignment like the potential of a shuffle. Everyone gets on their best behavior. But I think he's also right that as soon as, and Marika as well, that as soon as that is gone, anyone who wasn't selected becomes even more grumpy than they were before. I've never seen a caucus member who isn't in cabinet who doesn't think that the government as a whole would be doing so much better if only they were named to cabinet. It's a universal.
Tom, your thoughts on sort of the bigger picture here, the impression that this leaves. I take Corey's point about not everyone knowing, or being super familiar with who these individuals are, but they had been around for a long time. And it comes it's the timing of it, I think, that certainly maybe amplifies the impact.
Yeah, and to Marika's point, I couldn't agree more. This is clearly orchestrated, and it's orchestrated to put a little bit more chaff into the air to try to distract the radar. And since the weekend, I'm not saying that what happened between Canada and India didn't have to happen or that India didn't do anything wrong. But of course, the timing of that announcement on the Monday of a long weekend was clearly intended to distract. The outburst yesterday about Poilievre and why doesn't he come and look at the secret documents. I want to be able to warn and arm the Conservatives. That's called going over the top. And now this. So you do have a coordinated effort to take out the bad news. But as everyone has just said very correctly, I've been a party leader. I can talk to that. Yes, of course. If you say that there's going to be some important assignments going out and you've got some people leaving, you're going to try to get people on their best behavior. I don't think it's going to change a thing. I think that there are 20 or 25 people who had the guts to sign a piece of paper. They'll be going to the microphones, to use the term, which is the correct one, in a caucus. And the other thing, of course, that we're seeing is that somebody of the caliber of Sean Casey, who for reasons that are never been totally clear, was left out of caucus. Has left out of cabinet. He's still in caucus. But, this guy went to the microphones himself this week publicly, called for his leader to step down. And by the way, did it in perfect French. People tended not to know that this MP from Prince Edward Island speaks absolutely fluent French and was on French and English TV saying, look, his time's up. So I think that all of that is a critical mass of information that Trudeau and the people around him should be processing in the right way. Are they oblivious to it? I'm not convinced they're oblivious to it. I think that they know that the writing's on the wall, but Trudeau has a couple of options. The main one, of course, is prorogation. A lot of people have talked about that. The other one, I know it sounds over the top, but it's worth mentioning that he has the absolute right constitutionally to walk across the lawn from Rideau Cottage, where he is, to Rideau Hall, where Mary Simon is, and ask for an election writ. I don't think he'd do that. That would be suicidal right now, and there's nothing in place. But it's his nuclear option, to put it that way.
Brian, the term that Tom used, critical mass, do you think there is critical mass at this point on the question of his leadership?
Well, it depends how you kind of frame that, in the sense, is there critical mass of those that will put their name to a letter or to the cause? I'm not sure. I think if there's 20, that's probably potentially manageable. If it's getting up to 30, 40, it's starting to get a little more complicated. And of course, a bit to Corey's point too, I mean, who are the personalities that are behind it as well? Are they people that may have sort of more oomph nationally or in certain regions? So I think there's a bit of a set of factors that would need to be known. Now, I want to point to the fact that, I mean, Blaine Higgs is in the middle of the at the end of the New Brunswick election campaign. A few months ago, a lot of people thought he would no longer be the leader. And to Tom's point, one of the things, to paraphrase Higgs, he basically said, if they keep this up, I'm going to go and call an election, and I'm going to be the leader in the campaign. So he's running that campaign now, and not a lot of people would have thought that would have been the case. And I just want to add, by the way, I thought Corey's point was pretty good. When I've had the chance to form a cabinet, and I can tell you that you think you're going to call everybody and they're going to be so happy when they're about to be asked to serve in cabinet, and you have the impression that they thought that was going to be the case, and then you start to think to yourself, all the people that are at home not getting a call from you that night that probably thought that was going to be the case, so that they were going to get one. So that always worries you as a leader, and I couldn't agree more, and I'm just putting emphasis. I do think in the long term it will be a bit of a challenge and maybe a big challenge for those that don't get the call in this next cabinet shuffle. They probably will be all that much more irritated. Whether they say it publicly or not will be the question.
Marika, I know you talk to people all the time who are, involved in discussions around the Prime Minister's future. What is your sense about their sense of what critical mass would be?
I think that's the million-dollar question, and I don't think there is agreement from Liberals in the backbench. They think 20 is a big number, and I think that is too. If that comes public, that is a sizable chunk of your backbench when you factor out parliamentary secretaries, cabinet ministers who are just
like
not going to be the ones.
Yeah.
It's a third of your backbench. When you factor in all the people not running already, it's even more, right? So who is behind Trudeau when he's at the next general election, if they are saying this? From our reporting, some people close to the Prime Minister think that it will only be a handful that comes forward and that will be manageable. They were very skeptical about our number that we reported, that it would be 20 MPs as a minimum coming forward. Of course, this is all based on what we know now. There's a lot of uncertainty in this, a lot of sort of dissent or discussion still among the people who are coordinating or trying to be part of this revolt as to how they go forward. But another person close to the Prime Minister said they really actually don't know what to expect in terms of the numbers. The Prime Minister, despite what he said publicly on Monday, that he's just making calls about India, he has been making calls one-on-one to MPs to test the waters and see where things are at. But the strategy right now from the Prime Minister's office does seem to be about day by day and getting through the day and not sort of, the bigger picture.
Do you think the Prime Minister's time at the helm of the Liberal Party, Corey, is limited?
I think it's limited, and it's going to come to an end. It's just a matter of how. Certainly, if he goes into an election campaign, it's going to be over. There's, I think, as close to a 0% chance of him being reelected as you can come to in this business. So it's going to come to an end. It's just how, whether it's on his own terms by recognizing what is obvious to anyone who can read a poll, that Canadians are done with him. And I think, the question for members of caucus that they're looking at, and just to put it bluntly, caucus are usually a bunch of chocolate soldiers. They melt as soon as you turn up the heat. And the fact that they even have 20 of them talking about doing this is a big number. And, it only took a dozen to end the political career of Stockwell Day. It took 25 to end Margaret Thatcher's career. So I think it's a substantial number, but they're looking at their own survival right now. And the reality is, I think for those in Atlantic Canada, probably none of them are coming back, like zero. So, it's more of an existential question for them. They know he's gone one way or another, and they're starting to think about whether or not they want to be gone too. And I think the Liberal Party writ large has to start thinking about whether, what this means for the party, for the institution of the Liberal Party, if they allow such an unpopular leader and Prime Minister lead them into the next election campaign.
Last word to you, Tom.
Vassy, I'll go back to an interview you had with Anthony Housefather, a Montreal area MP, on Tuesday. And I was gobsmacked. I was waiting to come on to a panel after that, and I got to see the whole thing as it rolled out. And I was amazed because Housefather is that quintessential, loyal, partisan Liberal. All his values, his whole career. He's that guy. And he refused to say whether or not he supported Trudeau. He said, well, I'll always support the person who's leader, but then again, we have to have a discussion about who the leader should be in the next campaign. So when you get stuff like that from a person like Anthony Housefather, there is definitely something difficult that's going to be there for Mr. Trudeau when he comes to caucus next week. And I think, I agree with Marika, if it's anywhere near 20, that's a huge number, and that's very hard to manage. You can't talk your way beyond 20 people who are saying, boss, it's really time for you to leave.
Okay, I got to leave it on that note. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the discussion. Brian Glant, Corey Tonight, Tom Mulcair, and Marika Walsh.